So I think that Elliot Anderson is one of the best young central midfielders in world football at the moment, but given that next summer he's surely going to cost at least £60 million, the question is he good enough to warrant Manchester United paying that sort of fee? Well, in order to answer that, we need to break it down into 3 questions. Firstly, what are his best attributes and where do I think he could improve? Secondly, what style of central midfielder is he, specifically looking at what type of roles that he would suit from a tactical point of view. And thirdly, how does he rank statistically in comparison to other Premier League central midfielders based on last season's performance. So in terms of Football Manager player roles, which I do think is a good way of kind of working out what type of player a player is, Anderson would fit best as a deeper line playmaker, as one of his best attributes is his progressive passing ability. Specifically when it comes to threading incisive passes between the lines, splitting the opposition's midfield line, and crucially, utilising that kind of disguised passing technique that I've talked about being so valuable in the cases of Adam Wharton and Lamine Camara. If you want to check out my analysis videos on those two, I'll leave them linked in the description or in the eye above. But this disguised passing technique allows him to shape like he's going to play the pass on the outside of an opposition player, which can lead them to shifting their balance one way before at the last second he's able to close his hips on the ball and find a player in behind the midfield line, which combined with his vision and textbook technique makes him perfect to operate in deeper areas of the midfield in possession. And I'm going to show you statistical data behind my assessment in just a minute. However, the reason I rate Anderson so highly is that his skill set is incredibly complete, and I would argue that stylistically, he's exactly what you would want from a modern day central midfielder. But before I break down why I think this, as well as showing you how he compares to other Premier League central midfielders statistically, if you want to check out any cheap, good quality football jerseys, go over to jerseyfifa.co. They've got a variety of different current season and retro jerseys, including the new Manchester United shirts for this season. They sent me over the home shirt with Bruno Fernandes on the back, as well as this 06-07 Manchester United white away shirt with Ronaldo 7 on the back, alongside this Zinedine Zidane Juventus shirt from the 1990s as well. If you use code Atlantis at checkout, you'll get a 10% discount, so I'll leave a link in the description and in the comments section below. So we can see how good he is at progressing the ball forward via his passing statistically, as he ranked in the 90th percentile for his progressive passes adjusted for possession, as well as sitting in the 70th to 80th percentile range for his overall progressive passes completed and his passes into the final third. And whilst he has shown an eye for a defence splitting through ball, a trait that he certainly has in his locker, he does rank slightly lower for the volume that he completes. Alongside his progressive passing ability, Anderson also has the press resistance that United desperately need in both the build-up phase and higher up in the middle third, capable of receiving the ball with his back to goal under immediate pressure and using his close ball control and fluid body movement to twist and turn out of pressure, before then being able to circulate the ball with a pass or drive forward into the space behind the pressing player. And we can see this ability as he ranked around the 80th percentile for both his successful dribbles and his dribbles per 100 touches. However, at the moment he does rank quite low for the percentage of dribbles that he completes, which is a reason as to why I don't think he's optimal to play as a deep single pivot at the base of the midfield in a kind of regista role, despite his progressive passing ability, being better suited to playing in a more advanced role alongside this type of player in the midfield, such as maybe Adam Wharton or Angelo Stiller. Now, he isn't as high volume a ball carrier as he is a dribbler, as you can see statistically, sitting around the 60th to 65th percentile range, but he does have the ability to progress the ball via his carries when the space is afforded to him, due to his burst of acceleration and his fairly good pace over longer distances, combined with his physicality that gives him the sort of power that we would see from someone like Steven Gerrard. And I think Gerrard is a very good stylistic comparison, because Anderson, like Gerrard, is a deeper line playmaker who could also be classed as a box-to-box midfielder as well, primarily due to the energy that he provides both in and out of possession. In the press, he has a front foot ball winning style that is only bettered by Agate from United's current central midfield options. He has excellent reading of the game, as well as the acceleration and assertiveness to jump out vertically off the midfield line in order to make an interception in front of an opposition player or provide an aggressive standing tackle. And so this does make him perfect for a counter press as well, being the type of player who will give his side a significant advantage when it comes to winning loose balls high up the pitch. And statistically, he actually looks more impressive defensively than solely from the eye test, ranking around the mid to high 80s for his defensive and aerial duels won, around 20 percentile points lower for his interceptions adjusted for possession, and his defensive duel percentage rate is hovering around the median, which considering his volume is still quite impressive. But rather unexpectedly, he is aerially dominant statistically, sitting in the mid 90th percentiles for the percentage that he completes. However, there's another aspect of Anderson's game which actually sees him fit the role of a carrilero, which is essentially a central midfielder who has the responsibility of shuttling across to cover wide areas and tracking runs in between the fullbacks and centre-backs, and this is his defensive discipline, positional awareness and his athleticism, and this would fit with what Rúben Amorim would require in his 3-4-3, both in pressing situations and when having to defend against quick switches of play. However, Anderson isn't the complete package just yet. As I said earlier, I do think that he could increase his carrying volume, which would enable him to become more of a progressive threat during transitional attacks, but also I think his long passing could also improve, as sometimes I do think he tries to release runners in behind from angles that are a bit too straight, and he is liable to overhit these longer passes as well. Although I do see this not only being an area of his game that he will improve over coming seasons, but also potentially being a trademark attribute in his game, as he has shown that he has a passing range to switch play from deeper areas. And when looking at his pass completion rates from last season, you can see why I compare him to a Steven Gerrard rather than maybe a Paul Scholes or a Michael Carrick, as he sits around the 30th percentile for the majority of his pass completion rates, whether this is forward, progressive, short or long, suggesting that whilst Anderson is a progressive passing weapon, he's not the kind of metronome who will sit deep and dictate play, such as maybe a Walton or a Stiller for example. Even though I do think he's short passing, his give and goes, as well as his forward movement after he plays a pass to open up passing lanes and drag opposition presses out of areas in order to create space, is something that you can only really see the value of through the eye test. Now, whilst his progressive passing is superior in deeper areas of the pitch, he does also have an eye for a pass further up the pitch as well, being a creative threat in and around the final third, capable of fizzing crisp passes into players around the box, using that very clean textbook passing technique, although statistically the volume isn't quite there in his game just yet, sitting either side of the median for his deep completions and his passes into the box. However, in terms of chance creation, his expected assist rate, overall and per 100 touches, shows that he does have the creativity further up the pitch. That does suggest that you do want to give him the license to break further forward rather than holding a deeper position in the rest defence, even though his defensive attributes and his athleticism does allow him to rotate into these areas when necessary, which would provide positional fluidity to the possession system. Alongside this, whilst we do occasionally see him utilising his athleticism in order to provide movement ahead of the ball, I think in the right role in specific systems, he could resemble someone like Darren Fletcher, having the ability to break off the back of the opposition's midfield line, providing third man runs from deep ahead of play, such as underlapping wide players with runs between the opposition's fullbacks and centre-backs in order to get into low crossing positions in those interior channels in the final third. When he is in the final third, statistically he's at or just below the median for his XG and goal scoring metrics, showing that at Forest the role he's currently playing isn't allowing him to break into goal scoring positions. However, he does appear to have an astute shooting technique off of both feet when he does receive the opportunity in and around the edge of the box, and so I do think that with the right stability in the midfield and defensive line behind him, he could develop his goal scoring ability further, breaking into the box from deep to receive cutbacks or providing movement ahead of the centre forward, as we did see Steven Gerrard develop in his game around 2008-2009, where he played more of a second striker role alongside Fernando Torres. And so overall, I do rate Elliot Anderson highly. I think at the moment he certainly improves United, primarily due to him having a more complete skill set than any of United's other central midfielders, having an athletic, aerial and defensive advantage over Mainoo, but as of yet his creative and progressive passing is a level below Bruno Fernandes's, and factoring out ground coverage, I do think that Casemiro is probably a level above defensively, at least statistically anyway. However, potential-wise, I do see Anderson surpassing all of United's central midfielders, even Mainoo, probably by the end of the season. And so by the summer, I do think that he could establish himself as a Champions League level quality central midfielder, and likely worth around £50 to £60 million, and given how his skill set aligns with what is required in the modern game, As well as Amorim's midfield double pivot specifically, if he does remain into next season, I think Anderson may well be worth that price. Of course, depending on the other options on the market. However, at this point in time, I think he's probably worth around 40 to 45 million pounds, but of course the transfer window is closed. And so you're likely looking at paying at least 50, probably as much as 60 million pounds. And I am going to do a separate video where I compare him to other central midfielders such as Ederson, Angelo Stiller and Adam Walton, analysing which of those options I think should be United's priority target going into next summer. So let me know what you think of Elliot Anderson and my analysis on him, and if you want to check out any cheap, good quality football jerseys, go over to jerseyfifa.co. You can use code Atlantis at checkout for a 10% discount. I'll leave a link in the description and in the comments section below. And if you do want to get a 7-day free trial to get access to some plot graphs, circle charts, as well as some tactically annotated video footage, I'll leave my Patreon linked on the end screen now as well.